In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, I'll be reading verses 1 through 6. Are we beginning to commend ourselves again, or do we need, like some people, letters of recommendation to you or from you? You yourselves are our letters written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of the human heart. What Paul is saying here is he's saying to the church at Corinth, he's saying that I don't want to brag, but you are our legacy. You are the way you conduct yourselves and the way you live your life represents what we have taught you and what we're about. Now, I have to ask this question today because I feel like on Father's Day, that's one of the things that most of us, if we're fathers, we hope to leave a legacy behind. When we leave this life, what is it that we want people to say about us? And so today on Father's Day, I want to direct a message mainly to the men of our church, but if you're a lady here, you may catch some of this anyway as I talk to the men a little bit. And I want to ask a question. What is a real man? Now, I remember back years ago, they had a saying that real men don't wear pink. But then I saw Joseph wear it, and I said, hey, he looks pretty good. So real men may, wear pink. I don't know. In some cultures, to be a real man, when a boy moves to the man, he goes through a rite of passage, or he has to go through some ritual to be ushered into manhood. Now, the Jewish tradition is around the age of 12, a boy is considered to be a man. Can you believe that? 12 years old, considered to be a man. He's suddenly responsible for his actions. And he goes through a ritual called a bar mitzvah. And many of you have heard of that before. Of course, we've also heard of other rites of passage. I actually read not too long ago of a tribe that actually took their young boys out in the rite of passage, and they would actually tie them to a tree and leave them there overnight. And they could not cry out or ask for help. And if they didn't, then they were a man. We've heard of and seen all sorts of rites of passage. We've heard of people, boys become men when they can throw a spear so far or shoot a bow. Or maybe they can walk barefoot over some hot coals. I don't know. But today in our society, it seems that the lines are being blurred a bit in our gender-neutral society. In my day, there were certain rituals that I considered masculine and that a boy should be able to do as he progressed into manhood. In other words, there were certain characteristics that I considered real men to do. There were simple rites of passage. For example, I always thought that a boy should be able to throw further than a girl. That was just me. I thought that a boy should be able to at least, as he's moving into manhood, should be able to skip a rock at least 3 times on a pond. If he couldn't do that, he pretty much had to stay a boy, in my opinion. He had to be able to climb a tree and then get down. It was always easy going up. It was always the coming down that was the hard part to be a real man. He had a boy had to learn how to blow his nose without a handkerchief. Put that finger on the side and let it go. That's what a real man would do. They didn't need no handkerchief. They didn't need no Kleenex, And then there were the more complex things that you had to do as a boy and growing into a man. You had to be able to spit without it landing on your shirt. I always thought that was really an important thing that a boy should know. You had to be able to walk through a field, and step in a cow patty fresh and not go, ugh. You had to go at least a week without taking a bath. You had to hear your mama call you 5 times for dinner and still be able to convince her that you never heard her. You had to be able to bait your own hook, put that old grimy worm on your hook. You wasn't a real man if you didn't do that, And you had to be able to take the fish off if you accidentally caught one. You had to eat all your mashed potatoes without gagging. You had to be able to whip at least one person your own size, and it had to be a boy. If it was a girl, she had to be bigger than you. You had to know at least enough about a combustible engine, a car engine. You had to know at least enough that when somebody said, hey, I think your spark plugs are missing, you didn't ask, well, who took them? Some of you still don't get that because you don't know what I'm talking about, because you're not a real man. You had to kill something. I mean, boys had to kill, you had to kill a bug, you had to kill a frog, you had to kill a rat, you had to kill something as you progressed into manhood, you know. And I'll be quite honest, my dad was a hunter. He was a rabbit hunter. He had these dogs and he loved to rabbit hunt. My brothers loved to rabbit hunt. I just never was a big hunter. Every time Dad would say, "You going hunting with me?" I'm like, I don't know, the rabbit really hasn't done anything to me yet. So it was kind of tough for me to go. I never really got into it that much. And I never really understood the mentality, especially of deer hunting and squirrel hunting, because they would always go at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, do deers not eat lunch? I mean, are they not up at 11 o'clock? Why you got to go at 4 o'clock? But real men had to get up at 4 o'clock if you were going to go hunting. And as I grew older, the pressure mounted to become a real man. I mean, we had to try to prove our manhood. We're no longer athletic, you know, we'd lost our athletic ability, and so we just wore a jersey and screamed at the TV watching the football game. And then when our team won, we feel like we accomplished something. Look at us, Alabama won. Whatever. But that was a real man. That's a real man. If you don't have the jersey, you're not on the team. Real men, I guess, wear football jerseys. Real men, you know, we had to prove our manhood on how we dressed. You know, real men didn't wear slacks back in my day. We wore breeches, right? And we would say to little smart alecky kids, "You're getting too big for those breeches, aren't you?" You know? Real men didn't wear the pants pulled high back in my day either. They wore them fairly low. Now, I'm not talking about thuggishly low, but they wore them low, you know, so that when they bent over, you could see that half moon. Those pants just never really quite fit, did they? And then real men proved they were real men by what they ate. Never go to a chili cook-off among men. They'll get the hottest chili. There's no way they could like that chili. There's no way. It's the kind of chili that you put in your mouth, and as soon as you put it into your mouth, you break out into a sweat. And those men will be sitting around going, that is so good. You know that's not good. But you had to be a real man to swallow that down. Real men, you know, they do things like they eat like things like mountain oysters, and you know what that is. And chitlins. Oh my God. Could you imagine the first man that ate a chitlin? He had to be with another man. He wasn't just on his own killing his hog and going, "You know what? Those hog guts look good. I think I'm going to take a bite." No. He had to be with another man because he had to prove himself. He's like, "You cook them, I'll eat them. I'm a real man." See, here we go, real men. Real men also proved their manhood by what they drove back then, didn't they? Man, back in my day, you didn't drive no Prius. My goodness gracious. You didn't drive no SUV. You drove a 4-wheel drive truck. And I still drive one because I'm a real man. Man, and the bigger the truck, the better. The bigger the wheels, the better. The louder the truck, the better. That's what a real man drove. Real man didn't care nothing about no gas mileage. He cared about cubic engine size, you know? Hey, give me a big old truck, gets 2 miles to a gallon. Who cares? That's what I drive because I'm a real man. The bigger, the better. You know, today, though, I do want to define real quickly what a real man is. And I wanted to define it in a way that you couldn't disagree with it, okay? I think, first of all, a real man is someone who's real. You see, a real man, by being real, I mean that you're not a fake or you're not a pretender. A real man doesn't have to prove anything, you know. What you see is what you get. They've outgrown the need to impress. You don't have to impress anybody. A real man doesn't really care if they see if you laugh. You know, when they laugh, they don't mind you seeing them laugh. They don't mind seeing them cry. They don't pretend that they don't. And they're not ashamed to love. A real man's not ashamed to love, and they don't pretend that they don't love. They love their children more than they love themselves. Now, that's an easy thing to say. But you see, with love comes discipline. Even the Bible says for those whom God loves, He disciplines. And so to really love somebody means that sometimes you've got to do things that you don't want to do. I remember my daddy never had any problem with discipline. That's not an issue he had, right, Mama? He didn't. He had no problem with discipline. And I remember there was a time that he was about to spank me, and he took off that belt, and he said, bend across that bed. And he said these words to me. He said, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. And I thought, you big old liar. Ain't no way that that's going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me. And I didn't realize until I had children of my own how true that was. I realized that, believe it or not, Ben, it's not really fun to spank your kids. It's not. It's not really fun to discipline your children. And it's very easy to back off of your word. It's very easy to say, I'm going to do this, and then don't do it. And I see that happen over and over again with parents who say, if you do that one more time, I'm going to do this. Let me give you some advice, parents, for somebody who's now a grandparent, okay? Don't ever tell your child you're going to do something and not do it. If you're not going to do it, don't say it. But if you say you're going to do something, you better do it. Because I promise you that in the end, your child is going to respect you on that you are a man of your word. That what you say is what you're going to do. And children need discipline. It's a shame today that I see so many fathers that are more concerned about being a friend to their kid than they are being about a father to their kid. That's a shame to me. I heard somebody tell me not too long ago, well, Brother Wade, things have changed since you were a parent. Well, you know what revival is? Revival is going back to what was right and forget about change. Just because the world changes don't mean you've got to change. It don't mean your family got to change. And the Word of God's never going to change. And the Word of God says discipline your children. Am I getting too loud? Woo, you're getting a passion of mine now. You saying that because you don't want a spanking. You on the other team. I remember, real men, they like I said, they're real people. They don't have to live their dreams through their children. And I see that a lot too, especially in sports. I coached for many years, and I saw it so often. I remember watching a guy who I knew very well at a baseball game of his son. And the whole game, he was screaming at his son about every little mistake that the boy made. I don't even know how the boy could play out there. And it was obvious to me that the father was trying to make his son, didn't want to be embarrassed by his son, that the father was pressing his son to do something that the son really couldn't do. Now, the problem with this scene is that I knew the father. And I knew the father stunk at baseball. And yet he's out there screaming at his son the whole ball game. And I knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to live his dream through his son. Let me say this. You cannot live your dreams through your children. Not only that, but real men, when it comes to loving their children, they not only spend quality time, but they spend quantity time. I hear that all the time too. I hear men say, well, I don't spend a lot of time with my child, but when I spend time with my child, it's quality time. You know what? Sometimes you just need to spend quantity time. Sometimes you just need to spend time. I remember my dad used to sometimes, and he didn't overwork me. He probably should have worked me harder. I actually was able to build a little building, a little gazebo or something. I don't know what I built. I built something. And as I was building it, I had my little saws out there, and I had my tools and all this stuff. And as I was building that, it immediately came to my mind, my dad built this. You say, what do you mean? Your dad wasn't there? My dad built this because my dad, if it hadn't been for my dad, I would have never known how to use these tools. I mean, every bit of knowledge that I have was passed on to me from my father. I was talking to Brother Gene the other night, and he was talking about that back in the day, if you want to, people say to him now, Brother Gene, how are you able to do so much stuff? And he says, well, back in the day, if it was going to get done, we did it. If the car needed fixed, we fixed it. If the house needed repaired, we repaired it. And he learned through his father. That knowledge was passed on. And I remember my dad, he used to get up and he would say to me, he'd come in there early in the morning, not only when he went rabbit hunting, but when he wanted to go work and wire a house. He was an electrician. He'd come in, he would say to me, come on and go with me. And man, I hated going. I hated it. And I would get up, and sometime, all the time, because if I didn't get up, I'd go back to that discipline thing. So I'd get up and I would go, and all the time I was there, it would be like stupid little projects. Like, why are you making this stuff up for me to do? You don't really need me here. As a matter of fact, one time I asked him, I said, why did you ask me to come? You don't really need me here. And he said, maybe I just want to spend some time with you. Sometimes we as parents, we just need to spend some time with our kids. We need to get them up and make them do things that they don't want to do. We need to pass on the knowledge that we have to our children that we have. It's such a shame today. I remember not too long ago, I had a young man, he was cutting grass at the church where I was working, and as he was cutting the grass, I left, and I had the mower started for him, and I left. This kid was in college. He was 20 years old. I left, I came back, and the mower was just sitting there. I said, what's wrong with the mower? And he said, watch. And he went out there and he started the mower, and it was jerking and jumping and missing, and it was not running correctly. And I reached down and I pushed the choke in. It took off. He didn't even know that you pushed the choke in, brother, when to get it to go. Well, I'm not faulting him. He's now a very successful man. But the thing is that this knowledge was never passed on to him. He had never cut grass in his life. You poor women, the guys you're going to marry of this generation, I sometimes feel sorry for you. I hope you know how to work on a car. I hope you know how to cut grass. I hope you know how to do basic plumbing. Because, some of these guys today, oh my goodness. But real men pass on knowledge to their children. So look, when you get mad at these young men that don't know how to do anything, instead of getting on them, go talk to their dad. Say, where were you sorry? You passed this guy on to me. Now I got to raise him. Real men not only love their children, they love their wives. They treat the wives like precious jewels, not throwaway rags. You understand that she may not have the figure she once had. No, that's because she's a little wider at the hips from bearing your children. She's a little grayer from worrying about you. She has wrinkles under her eyes and her skin sags a bit more than it used to, but real men love their wives. And a real man would not trade her in for a younger model because he understands that love is more than a sexual turn-on. Because the love of his life, cleaned his toilets and washed his dirty underwear. Her love cleaned up his kids' vomit and changed dirty diapers. His love wiped the tracks of his dirty boots as he walked through the house 1,000 times with mud on them. So a real man loves his wife. He hugs her and kisses her, not to manipulate her for sexual pleasure, but simply because he loves her. Real men are content with themselves. They don't need to be put on any pedestal. They just do what men do. They recognize that people are dependent upon them, so they get up and they go to work even when they're sick and don't feel like it. They get the job done. They expect no handouts from anyone. Their word is their bond. If they say it, they'll do it, and a handshake's a contract. They they cut their sick neighbor's yard even before they cut their own. Why? Because they're real men. They're real men, and they know that real men love. And if they have a fault, that fault may be that they take pride in their last name. They realize that with their name goes their reputation. And in the end, a good man's name is all he really has. And when he's putting up 10-hour days at the factory or the construction site or helping a neighbor build a fence, a real man does the very best he can do because he knows that his name carries his reputation. And to shame his name would be to shame his wife and to shame his kids and to shame the daddy who gave him that name. And I'm compelled at this point to ask, where are the real men today? Lastly, real men are not only real, but they're men. They realize that they're not God. They're simply men. It's easy today to believe that you're God. It's easy today because we're spoiled rotten. We're like spoiled children who have too much stuff. And so somehow we don't really need God anymore, do we? We pretty much can run down to Walmart or Home Depot and get whatever we need. We don't have any real needs anymore. We're like gluttons. We have so much that nothing ever really satisfies. And so there used to be a time when a man lived on the farm, and he knew that he was a man. He knew he needed God, because if God didn't send the rain, then he would starve and his family would starve. He didn't need the rain to get rich. He just wanted to eat. Real men realized that they could not make it rain. They could not stop the pain, and that they will die. I guess you could say that real men know that they are weak and that they need God. And they teach their children about God, and they show their children who God is by the example in their lives. For they realize that in 100 years, it will not matter what you gave your children if you did not give them Jesus. Do you understand that? In 100 years, it will not matter what you gave your children if you did not give them Jesus. For they will curse your name one day in an eternity. You know that's true because many of them are blaming you already because when they're seeing their psychologists in their counseling sessions. Well, if old daddy hadn't been the way he was. The greatest compliment your child will ever pay you is that my daddy was a man of God. It is not that my daddy drank more beer than your daddy, or my daddy could cuss louder than your daddy, or my daddy even taught me how to play baseball. But my daddy was a man of God who loved my mother and who loved me. In all my years of counseling, in all my years of working with addiction and people who are in addiction, I have never had one person in a support group or one person come into my office with an issue and say these words, well, I had a daddy who loved Jesus, who loved my mother, and who loved me. Not one time have I had somebody come in my office and say that, who had issues, serious issues. Because our fathers are so important in our lives. And I believe in this great land of America today, fatherhood is under attack. And I believe that men are under attack. And I believe it's time now to have revival. It's time now for men to become real men. To truly wear the pants or breeches. Saddle up, do your job, and be a man. It's time to quit making the women lead, and it's time for us to take our role in the society and in the family that God ordained you to have and to be. The problem with America today is that, I believe, is that fathers are no longer fathers, and they're no longer being the real men that God has called them to be. Today, men, you are writing your legacy. As Paul said in 2 Corinthians 3:3, not on tablets of stone. You're not writing your legacy on paper, but on tablets of the human heart. Today you are writing your legacy. Don't tell me you love your children if you don't teach them through your words and your life that you love Jesus. Because if the truth be told, you are not really concerned with your legacy, and you are not a real man. Because above all things, real men love Jesus. And I believe that. You know, I know that there are some here this morning that you're a father and that you say that you love your kids and you love your wife, but are you doing the things that it takes to prove it? Are you a man of your word? Are you a man of integrity? Are you doing the things that God has called you to do and to be?